So, hi there, welcome to this webinar where today we're going to be looking at AI in education. This is the first in a series of 3 webinars being brought to you by NetSupport Group, as you can see over here. My name is Mark Anderson. I'm the Head of Education at NetSupport. You can follow us and all that we do at NetSupport Group on all of our socials. I've kind of given you a hint there, at NetSupport Group. You can follow me on Twitter too, at ICT Evangelist. And really excited to bring onto this very first of our series of 3 webinars. And the next one, of course, being next week, same time, same place, 28th of September, featuring Alan McKenzie and Beverly Clark, looking at online safety. And then the week after that, we've got another one, which will be looking at data protection, privacy, and usage. We've got some great guests there as well, with Claire Archibald and Tony Shepherd, 2 leading voices in data protection, privacy and usage and GDPR and all those things we need to use and think of to make sure that our children are kept safe while they're using all of our technology. But today we're taking a dive into artificial intelligence. It's been one of the buzziest, most exciting and actually transformative things I've seen in educational technology. And it's only really been brought to the fore in the last 11 months or so, since we all got our hands on and started using and getting excited with that thing called ChatGPT. Today, I'm really excited to bring 2 world-leading experts onto this webinar to share with you this afternoon. The first of which is Jaime Donally. Welcome to the webinar, Jaime. I hope you are very well. I'll let you introduce yourself in a bit more detail than I'll do right here and right now. Jaime has been a voice in the world of AR and VR for as long as I've known about AR and VR, to be honest. She is a leading light in that area, and she's going to be talking to us today about how artificial intelligence can be used in the classroom, and thinking about some of those ways in which you can use it and utilize it alongside AR and VR. Our other guest, our other expert panelist for the session this afternoon is the one and only Emma Darcy. She's Darcy Pryor on social media, and she is the digital lead for all things technology across the Chiltern Learning Trust here in the UK. We have got a global audience, so I thought it great to have a global panel today. Welcome to the webinar. Thank you both for taking the time to join me. Jaime, I introduced you first. Could you just start by telling us a little bit about yourself, please, and your work?
Sure. Yeah, I'm Jaime Donally. I am in Texas, and I share a lot about immersive technology. It's been a passion, really started off as a passion project that just grew and grew, and it's constantly changing, which I really love. It has been a cool journey to see the progression, and I think even moving ahead next year with all the new wearables releasing, I think that it's going to continue to grow. So it's just been something that I've been passionate about to share with teachers and really practical ways that this technology can impact learners.
No, absolutely. And it's one of the things that I love most about the educational technology space. I mean, I'm a teacher by profession, just as both of you are. And you know, I see some subjects and things like, you know, Romeo and Juliet, sorry, English teachers, but, you know, Romeo and Juliet is always going to be Romeo and Juliet. But when it comes to teaching and learning with technology and teaching computing and these sort of things, there's always something new to learn. It's so fast paced, isn't it? So it certainly keeps us on the edge of our toes, and there's always opportunities for learning. And that's something that I know you're really passionate about as well, Emma. So with no further ado, could you introduce yourself a little bit and talk about your work as well, please?
Of course. Afternoon, everybody. So my name's Emma Darcy. I am Director of Technology for Learning at both Denby High School in Luton and also the Chiltern Learning Trust. And my job is to support staff in schools and students with the effective use of technology. So obviously when AI, generative AI sort of exploded onto the scene about 9 months ago, that landed squarely in my lap. That's something that I've been having to work on in terms of like guidance at a trust level, at a school level, guidance for students. It's certainly kept me busy. I wouldn't say we've got everything right, but we're certainly trying, and that's one of the things I know we're going to cover as part of the webinar this afternoon.
Thank you, Emma. And I think it's really important as well, because we do see lots of blog posts and articles and Substacks and LinkedIn posts and all these different things saying about how brilliant these things are. And oh, look at this, what I've done is amazing. But actually, sometimes it's the things we share that where things haven't gone quite so well that are actually the most useful and helpful. So hopefully we can unpick and uncover some of those things from our conversations this afternoon. I wanted to start with you, Jamie, if it's possible, because you talked in your introduction about immersive technology, and I'm a huge fan myself, as you'll well know. But I wanted to sort of unpick with you a little bit about some of the innovative approaches to using technology and some of the ways in which you've been sharing about AI in the last sort of 9 to 11 months when it's sort of been coming available. I saw you talk at ISTE about it. Can you share a few things that you've been up to, please?
Yeah, AI, I feel like has been part of the immersive scene for a long time. I think it's been around quite a bit. We may not have identified it and drew it out like we are now with generative AI, but I think that there has been the progression of where this technology has gone because of AI. It's able to identify our space in a way that we really haven't had. So when we're talking about spatial learning, this technology is making adjustments and enhancements based upon where we're located, what we're trying to learn, and really making predictions about what we want to see. So these technologies have really been influential. I want to say with generative AI, it's certainly progressing. It's in its infancy, just like everything else. I certainly have a vision for what this means when it comes to content creation for the average person. I think that what our classroom students should be doing and creating is going to be incredibly enhanced with generative AI. When it comes to 3D content, when it comes to immersive environments, when it comes to audio, when it comes to conversations, when it comes to the way that we interact and learn through chatbot, all of those different ways that this technology is moving in immersive technology, I feel like we're just starting to scratch the surface.
No, absolutely. I mean, we've seen quite recently with the iPad OS and iOS 17, for example, new scanning capabilities, and people forget that the machine learning that sits behind many of these technologies is linked into AI as well. You talked about these sort of things in your response to my question there a second ago. Have you got some sort of real life examples of where that sort of thing happens with some of the tools you've used, like for example with MergeCube or some of the LiDAR stuff that you do?
Yeah, the LiDAR technology is unbelievable. I was just watching an ad yesterday about a security system that's using LiDAR technology to detect intruders. So what does this mean as far as notifying the right people, recognizing that there's a problem, and therefore leveraging that to help support somebody in their life? Yeah, I would say I've seen some really cool virtual reality experiences bringing in chatbots. I was hesitant and probably not as enthusiastic about it as I should have been, but going into the experience really blew my mind. It's almost like driving in a Tesla for the first time. You're really like, I don't know, I don't feel safe. And then you drive in it and you're like, I totally feel safe. I see everything around me that I wouldn't have seen without this technology, which again is leveraging some of the LiDAR technology. So when we're talking about what this technology is capable of doing, I think it's bringing to light more information for us to leverage and use, as opposed to being limited from what we've had in the past. Of course, the privacy concerns and all of that good stuff, I think, is top of mind. But when we're talking about possibilities, it's having these conversations, being able to prepare for the job force, being able to look at how we are inclusive in our classrooms, recognizing when there's possibilities of interest for our students to dive in to projects. So all of those things are coming into play. Plus, what is immersive technology without 3D assets and environments? And those things have been so limited based upon developer skills. And I think we're at a place now where, the floodgates have opened. Now we have this stuff being able to be spoken, created, and then that world being designed for us.
Thank you. It's really interesting. Thank you, Jamie. And I'm mindful as well, right? I mean, I'm mentioning terms like LiDAR. Some of our audience might actually know what LiDAR is. Could you just take a moment to explain what LiDAR is for those who might be sitting in the audience thinking, so they mentioned this thing, I'm here for AI, but what can you explain what LiDAR is? Is that
Well,
okay?
yeah, it's definitely using AI, right? So when we're talking about LiDAR technology, what it's doing is it's mapping out your space, and it's using the light detection that is going out and measuring the distance from the camera to be able to detect how far away objects are. And then what it's doing, it's not sending out one, it's sending out hundreds of thousands at one time. So as you're moving around a space, it's actually creating that object and mesh of what it is. It's also creating the texture with it to be able to map out and design. So ultimately, you could walk around, something in a computer in your classroom using this technology on pro models of Apple devices or very high-end technology that companies use. My brother worked for a company where he would go out for Starbucks and Amazon, where, in airports, they're preparing to go in and move, but they didn't want to just move in and then find out where all the plugs are and where the plumbing is at. So what they did is they sent in, these people to go in and essentially map out the space down to very precise measurements. They were able to have everything pre-built, pre-designed, so that when they actually arrive, it's not taking months to set up, it's taking days to set up. So, these types of technologies are used not just in construction, but I think in the classroom environment. Being able to bring in things that we couldn't from the museum now can be literally placed in our classroom. So the technology is phenomenal. I think it's going to continue to grow. Right now, where it's limited to is on a mobile device through Apple, but I can't believe we have that technology on our mobile devices. That's phenomenal. So it's really cool to see where this is going.
No, absolutely. And it really democratizes things as well, doesn't it? It means that if people have got this sort of technology in their pockets, then it means that you can access it, here, there, everywhere. Here in the UK, we can use it. IKEA uses this sort of technology, so you can sort of place furniture in your homes, so you can see where things will sit and prepare yourself that way. And in the classroom, we see children, creating 3D models and then projecting those into their classroom and then modeling things and trying them out beforehand and all these different sort of things as well. There's so much that we can do with all of it. I'm mindful, Emma, that we haven't brought you in on any sort of questions yet. So I'll just jump on to a new question for you, Emma, if that's okay, please. As someone who is working with schools, not just within your Denby school, but across the trust as well, can you share some of the ways that some of the teachers are using AI in the schools that you're working with?
Actually, no, that's not what I'm going to have as my starting point, Mark. I'm going to start
Is it
by
not?
saying what we've done to prepare our schools and our staff for using AI, because I think one of the dangers when you're in a school or college environment is that you see all these amazing shiny new tools, like you're saying. Jamie said the floodgates have opened. She's absolutely right. There's suddenly this rush of different tools. If you're on social media, you're seeing all of those. You want to jump in, you want to start doing them. And what we did as a trust is we knew we got staff starting to use these tools. We had staff who were perhaps in one of two camps, either quite fearful, stepping back, and then we had staff who couldn't jump in fast enough and couldn't start using these things. So what we did is we actually started with some very broad training for all staff in our schools around essentially what AI is, what generative AI is, how it works, and the things that they needed to know in terms of if they were going to go on something like ChatGPT, for example, what information could they put in there and what information should they not be putting in there. And we also have spent a lot of time talking to them about things like, and I know we'll be touching on this later, but things like, what motivates some of the companies when you put your data into this, what's going to happen to it, thinking carefully about what you choose to use and why. And what we did was we started with training for our Trust Central team. We then cascaded that down to senior leadership teams in our schools and also sort of looked at training them for working with the students. We did training for our support staff, because our poor old support staff in schools, sometimes trainings for teachers but not necessarily for them. And what we then did was then go, right, now you're in a position to start experimenting, to start trying things out. So we've had some really exciting things happening in schools. So we've got in one of our secondary schools, for example, some amazing work happening as part of computer science, with students training chatbots and learning exactly how that AI works and how they can control it and how they can adapt that. In our primary schools, we've got some really exciting work happening with things like Scribble Diffusion and Skybox AI, where children are doing everything from creating sustainable schools of the future to creating digital book reviews that you can go into a book in the school library, scan a QR code, and then you get a digital book review that's been part generated with AI. But I think one of the things that's really important when we're talking about this, and when we're talking about this in a school context or an education context, is this idea of preparing staff to feel equipped to use this, because obviously there's huge pros to it. There's also huge cons to it. Staff don't tend to want to hear about the negatives when you jump straight in with the shiny tools and this is going to do this, and it's going to reduce your workload and it'll be amazing. So that for us has been a real important aspect to using any kind of AI, has been training everyone to learn how to use it properly, so they're then making informed decisions before they go in and start using it themselves.
Thank you, Emma. And to be fair, I knew you were going to pull me up on that question because we talked about this beforehand. So, or best laid plans laid out there. But thank you so much for your answer there, Emma. I wanted to dive deeper because it is really important what you're sharing there, particularly about the cons, actually, because, you know, just like me, both of you, I'm sure, are you know, like champion horses waiting at the start of a race, wanting to go and use these things as they're fantastic and want to sort of dive in and all those sort of things. But that approach you're taking, Emma, which is one where you stop for a second and think this is great, but you know, what shouldn't we be doing with it? What sorts of content shouldn't we be putting on there? So would you mind sharing for our audience the sort of concerns you have had and what sort of things you've been sharing with your colleagues that they shouldn't be putting on there and why?
I think it comes back to this idea about I've heard several people refer to like the AI arms race, and you know, the number of companies that are sort of producing things at the moment because it's an incredible business opportunity for them. And we've got some really great, responsible, ethical companies developing things in a very sort of moral way. And then we've got some companies who probably are paying a bit fast and loose with what they're doing with your data because we haven't got that proper legislation in place yet. And as a result of that, I think when we started talking about AI with staff, it is making them understand that here you've got a tool that looks like it's there to just support you and make your life easier. Actually, there's a motivation behind that in terms of why it's asking for your data, why it wants to put that in there. And that idea about ethics is really important. It's also about identifying the weaknesses that are out there, the inherent biases in AI. So, you know, we've got lots of staff that obviously have been using, you know, LLMs to draft letters, potentially to look at curating content, but then it's that really being aware of actually the output you get could have inherent biases in it. And I've said to people, I find it much easier to challenge biases in a machine than I do in a person sometimes, to say, look, you can see that's generated that for you, that's really biased, you need to be aware, why is there no women in there, this sort of thing, you know, where's the ethnic diversity, that sort of thing. But again, it's making stuff where I always say to staff, don't generate anything through AI that you are not qualified to quality check yourself the output, because actually that's where the danger is. If you are asking any form of AI to create something for you and you're not properly equipped to be able to look at it and go, I need to work on that, that's factually inaccurate, that I'm not very happy with that's been generated, then you shouldn't be doing it in the first place, is my thinking, because that's where you are setting yourself up for a fall. So it's that understanding that, you know, there are different motivators driving AI in different ways. There is inherent, obviously, biases in the system, and that you do really need to QA what comes out and check for those AI hallucinations and all those other things that might be taking place.
No, absolutely. And that conversation really brings us on quite nicely onto our next question. And I'll pass it to you now, Jamie, if that's okay. We know, and Emma's explained it very nicely there, that AI does bring up a number of questions about ethics in education. Could you share your thoughts around that, please, Jamie?
Yeah, you know, I work for a company, Identity Automation, that manages identities of the ecosystems of schools. And, you know, the practices we put into place in school are usually the worst, right? We seem to get away with everything because, you know, we're just a school. And unfortunately, now we've seen our systems completely compromised, and even through our students. I think it's really interesting, as you were talking, Emma, I kept thinking back about some of the technologies we all say, I'll never do that, right? I said I'd never get an Apple Watch. And now it's like, if it's not there, I feel naked, you know? I'm like, where's my Apple Watch? I don't want to give away all my data, where I'm going, how I'm walking, what I'm doing, what I'm eating. And then, I'm never going to do facial scan because I'm giving away everything, all my facial features. And, what do? Facial scan for every type of my life to verify who I am. We talk about even wearables, like Google Glass was never really made it. It was really concerns about privacy, and where we said, oh, I don't want to do that because what if they walk into a bathroom, and they're recording, and it's like, well, everybody has their phones in their bathroom now, that they can record there too. All the privacy concerns are super valid. It seems like we let down our guard. And I do think that is a problem when it comes to generative AI. I think the way that we're prompting this technology to give us information, I think it's very difficult for us to get to a place where we're, even typing in searches on the web. What is that information? Where is that going? Who's collecting that about me? And I'm signed into my Google account, right? It's tracking all of my searches online. So as a student and the protection of the student, I think I'm just very, very hesitant that a student on their own should be approaching this. I think that's why the training, Emma, that you mentioned is so critical, but really under the protection of that educator. So I consult with companies all the time about using some of this technology. My approach to it is very much looking at it through the lens of talking to the adult that is working with those kids. How can we support students having access to things without necessarily giving student information away, right? So teachers monitoring and being the buffer between that getting out and available just to them independently. And I think that there's a balance, because we don't do that with the internet, but we protect the internet from them, with some constraints in settings that we have in schools. But at the same time, students tend to go in wrong directions, but I think that's where AI kind of isn't guarding. It's coming so quickly. It's not notifying us when there's dangers and problems, or restraining us when we should not be approaching it that way, like medically and things of that sort. So I think that there's so much possibility, but I also am just as critical of the potential danger of getting our students just in right off the bat. And I think, to me, I tend to lean on the side of working through the adult and supporting students that way.
I think that's a really valid point there, Jamie, and it's certainly really important. Was there anything more around the ethics side of things that you were covering with colleagues, or perhaps even with students? Has it impacted on your sort of digital citizenship curriculum at all, Emma?
It's impacted massively, to be honest. I mean, we've one of the things that we did to begin with, when it became apparent sort of how transformational this technology was going to be, and I think that was one of the first things that you had to recognize, is that actually this really is a complete game changer, and this is not something that you can park and get to 6 months down the line. You've actually, if you're going to be responsible, you've got to start addressing this now. One of the things that we did as a trust very early on is we had conversations on our ed team between the myself and people like the behaviour and safeguarding leads, because we have policies in schools and across the trust that cover traditional elements that will come up under a sort of a safeguarding policy. There would be, previously there was no mention of AI, so we would have policies in place for if someone filmed someone on their phone and put it online that related to that, but nothing that related to what happens if someone AI generates a very deep fake realistic image video of someone and has them saying something really terrible. We didn't have things in place, and that's been very useful, has been having those conversations, because in the same way that we say sort of safeguarding is a whole school responsibility, I think an understanding of AI is a whole school responsibility. You can't just say this is going to be bumped to 1 or 2 members of staff, this is going to go to your computing leads or whoever. This is something that all staff need to have a good working awareness of what it is and how it and how it works and how it operates. And I think we see a lot of we see a lot of content and guidance and information about data breaches and that sort of thing. We see a lot of things around AI to support and track student progress, potentially. We see a lot of things around AI allowing students to cheat, which of course it is, and of course they're doing it. I would have done it when I was their age, if I had it at my fingertips. We don't see so much about digital character or digital citizenship education for young people, which I personally believe should be absolutely core to the curriculum and to schools going forwards. Because when we're talking about developing digital character, which we're doing a lot now across the trust, we're not just talking about, oh, do you know how to stay safe online? Do you know how to report something if you see something that's not great? We're talking about training young people to make good choices with the technology they choose to use, to understand what's out there, to make good, appropriate choices about what is going to be effective to use, and also to know when not to use AI. I mean, one of the things I always go back to is something that I've been using a lot of Chris Goodall's advice actually recently, where he says AI can give good answers using language, but it doesn't care about you. Because that's one of the things that, again, going back to talking to our behaviour and safeguarding leads, if you've got a vulnerable young person who can't talk to someone at home, who's got lots of questions about their life, relationships, what they should be doing, and they go into AI and a chatbot to get the answers, that's a real concern. That's why it's really important that our young people understand how these things work and know how to critically curate the responses they get back, because when they start doing things like that, we're moving into really uncharted territory. And actually, like I say, I don't think there's enough conversation about that at the moment, that these are areas that we really need to be training and supporting our schools in so that they can train and support the students.
I think you've really hit a nail on the head in many ways there, Emma, on lots of things. Something that I'm really digging deep into myself at the moment is digital citizenship. And I think that, going a bit Spider-Man for a second, with great power comes great responsibility. And with generative AI, it gives us lots and lots of opportunity to do loads and loads of things. And you've alluded to that, I think we've shared before about, just because you can do something with technology doesn't necessarily mean that you should. But AI gives us that opportunity to really, because it is, like you say, transformational. It gives us that opportunity, doesn't it, to really rethink what it is to be a digital citizen. Bringing up conversations like we've had a moment ago around ethics, to give us conversations around bias. You mentioned plagiarism, and we'll jump into that. And I've got a question for both of you around plagiarism in just a moment as well. But it really does give us that real opportunity to put it right at the top of the agenda, because just like we're all in an English speaking world, teachers of English in the classroom, we're all teachers of safeguarding. We've all got a duty to safeguard our young people, and I think we've all got a duty to make sure that our young people are kept safe when they're using these tools, and they're aware of all the stuff that can happen. What happens, like you said, Jamie, before, with their data, what happens when they haven't got a person in IRL, in real life, to turn to Emma. Are they going to turn to Hey Pi and use Hey Pi, that tool you can actually chat to and have a real conversation with? I mentioned plagiarism before. It jumps in quite nicely into our next question. I remember the first time I showed ChatGPT to my youngest child. I showed it to him. He's like, "Wow, that's amazing!" That was the first thing he said. Second thing he said was, "Can I use it to help me with my homework?" And so children, are turning to this sort of stuff, and quite rightly, why wouldn't they? And like when we said a few moments ago, if I was at school, I'd be wanting to use it too. Absolutely. So if our children are going to be using it, how can we make it so that our young people, have you got any advice around this? A little bit to both of you, Jamie and Emma. How are you going about promoting this sort of digital citizenship, about using AI responsibly, and how do you go about citing sources when it comes to working with schools and sharing about this sort of thing with young people?
Well, I'll say that there is some serious concern. Emma brought up something about how we're getting our students to communicate to people and being very vulnerable. Seeing social media being a huge play in that too. Really emphasizing that communication. I just heard a keynote speaker this summer talking about viable relationships that they can have with with AI. I joked about this years ago in Rochelle Dene Post's session at FETC years ago, and we laugh about it because this guy married his avatar. I think that the dangers that we're facing are more than just, are they cheating? Because honestly, what's the difference when we tell them to write a report and they go research about the report and they just rewrite it in their own words? Did they really learn it, or are they just rephrasing what somebody else already said? We haven't been assessing their knowledge for a long time in many ways. So I think that the way we have approach to learning is pretty off. I think that isn't our biggest concern, although that seemed to be the biggest spotlight of AI, unfortunately. I think we should have been rethinking how we're working with our students and how that they're performing and demonstrating knowledge, rather than trying to replicate what we've all failed at miserably for a really long time. So I think that there is ways that we should have already approached, and I don't think AI is going to be any different. We need to think about how they're really owning that learning, and looking for detectors to see if they've messed up and where they've erred here is more of a cultural issue that you've built in your classroom than it is about an ethical issue, in my opinion. Because if you're encouraging people to cheat by getting a grade, then you've set up that system that's going to fail. But if you have encouraged them to thrive and want to learn and grow because it's for their benefit, they're not going to be using that technology in a way that's going to damage them. And if they are, it's ultimately to their defeat, right? So you're really reinforcing the benefit of learning as opposed to looking for, somebody cheating in the process. So that's my thoughts on it.
As I say, I agree 100% with Jamie on that. I think it's missing the point when you say that, oh, yes, we're going to rely on another form of technology to check for plagiarism, and then we'll be fine. We don't need to worry about it. It's this idea that you can kind of somehow park the real world at the school gates. I sort of heard Lord Jim Knight say that in a podcast the other week. And of course you can't. We're at a point now with schools where you can't keep this stuff outside. There were elements of schooling years ago where you could do that. You can't do that now. And another way that we're trying to address this, because I'm really conscious that we can see how we would like the curriculum to go. We can see how we would like to evolve education, perhaps, but we're not at that point yet where we're doing it. So schools and colleges have to find workarounds and ways in which they can bring this in, and they can develop this, and they can look at this idea of digital character and digital citizenship. So as an example, one of the things that we've done in Denby is we've introduced this idea of a period 6. So we've actually restructured the school day, and we have something called period 6. So for example, for year 7, it's on a Wednesday after school. And what we do in that period 6 is we focus on digital character, digital skills, digital careers, those sorts of things which we can't just slip in easily into the rest of the curriculum because it's very, very knowledge rich. We cover as part of that, and that's giving us the luxury of time with our young people to develop those key skills. Because the other one I use as a barometer is my own son, who's just gone into year 11. And obviously, he's quite tech savvy. He's aware of a lot of the tools that are out there. And when I asked him, are you using some of this AI to do your homework for you? His answer was, yeah, I'm a busy man. Now what we've tried to move towards is actually, let's use that AI in a smarter way, and let's use it to test ourselves. Because when it's you sat there in that exam, doing that exam, that is when that AI is going to fail you, when your phone cannot come out of your pocket and get you out of trouble. So actually the better digital character is to learn how to use that AI beforehand to test you and to test your knowledge, rather than to just get it to do the work for you.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Emma. And for those of you watching who don't get the year 11 reference, so here in the UK, year 11, or here in England at least, in year 11, that's the year that 16-year-olds sit their first sort of compulsory, sort of proper, as you would call them, examinations. So I love how you sort of flip that round as well, though, Emma. It's about sometimes, rather than using it for what, so you can cheat per se, it's actually use it in a way which actually can help you, so that when you're in those situations, it can actually help with your memorization and all these different things. It reminds me of a conversation I had with Alec Kouros, who has been talking, someone I follow on social media and seen at events many times over the years, who's a real voice in educational technology. And you can watch that conversation back actually on the NetSupport YouTube channel. Do a little plug there. Head over to youtube.com/NetSupport. You can watch that episode of Insights back. But he was sharing about how actually, a bit like you were saying there, Emma, flipping it gives us an opportunity to rethink and reframe about what assessment actually is, right? Because if you can ask the tool to write your essay for you or to answer the questions for you, then what are we actually testing, like you say, Jamie? And I was working with a school a few weeks ago at the start of the academic year on their inset day, and we got ChatGPT to write an essay. And the activity we planned from the back of that activity was in class for the children to then actually unpick, because the essay wasn't very good, right? So unpicking Why wasn't the essay very good? What would the LLM have to do to improve the essay to make it a better mark? What did it miss? What was the core knowledge? And so you're actually using it in a way to frame the conversations around learning in much more interesting ways than just using it for cheating. The other thing with these things as well, though, is, and you might better speak better about this than I, but it's about the probability. You know, if you use another technology to check whether technology has done the work and you haven't done it, it can never say definitively, can it, whether or not the technology has actually written the essay, or it can only give you a probability. So you can't go ahead and accuse young people of cheating and plagiarizing and all these sorts of things, can you? It can only tell you there's a probability that this has actually happened. Now, teachers have got a radar, you know. I would, without using some of our amazing tools from NetSupport, you know, if I had, I taught computing, if I had children at the back of my classroom who were messing around, I didn't need often to use technology to tell me that they were messing around. My teacher radar would pick that up almost immediately, right? So, you know, we can see from young people's work, we know what their work is like. We can tell and see, can't we, pretty quickly and easily from our knowledge of the young people we work with, whether or not these things are actually not as they perhaps should be. What do you think,
Absolutely. I
Emma?
think that it used to be a thing where you say about, oh, they're going to copy and paste something in from Wikipedia. If you give them a digital document, that's why we should all be writing pen and paper, because, you know, they can't copy and paste in. But it's exactly as you say, Mark, if, you know your students, and if all of a sudden that child that, you know, will barely write 3 sentences for you suddenly brings in an essay that's got an enormous amount of content in it, whereas before you could copy and paste it back into Google and check it, you still know that as a teacher whether that's right or wrong. And again, it's where I actually think there's a chance to promote the use of other digital tools to support that element of checking. So, for example, we would be saying to staff, we're a Google Trust, so set the homework as a Google Doc, because then you've got the ability to go back, look at that version history, see exactly how that child has written that essay or that piece of work. And if all of a sudden this huge, boom, slightly highlighted chunk of text comes in that looks like it has just been copied and pasted straight from ChatGPT, well, there's your answer. You know, it's using digital tools to give you some of that additional knowledge, and tools which a lot of schools hopefully have got anyway, but perhaps aren't using in that particular way at the moment.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Listen, I'm mindful of time. We're more than halfway through. I can't believe it. We've talked a little bit about the risks, and for viewers, it might seem like we've been a little bit doom and gloom and anti. I promise you, we all love our technology here on this webinar this afternoon. I want to jump on to some slightly different types of questioning, if that's all right. And I'm going to turn to you, Jamie, with a question. Creativity, you know, technology provides us the opportunity to, you know, not only can technology democratize creativity and access to doing all sorts of things. I've been using lots of tools like Midjourney and Firefly from Adobe and so forth and so on, Leonardo. There are so many great things out there, but there are many of these immersive technologies you were talking about, which, when they're enhanced by AI, can really help. And I think about multiple sort of situations, that idea of app smashing and taking one thing into another to then do this. Have you got any examples of some of the sort of creative uses of technology incorporating AI that you've been sort of playing around with yourself at all that you could share?
Yeah, there's so much. I will backtrack a little bit outside of the immersive technology space. Working in marketing and training for a company, I use AI, generative AI, every day. I use it in how I respond to customers. I use it in recapping. I use it to take video content and converting it into blog content, taking case studies and converting it into press releases. So there is, like, I am all over the place. I'm not always the subject matter expert. So to Emma's point, I always go back to that's me and say, what do you think? Is this exactly the way it should be stated? There's always change. It never remains exactly the same. And that tells you that it's the human touch that is absolutely important in that. And that subject matter expert really knowing their content. So I think that, you know, on that end, I think we've got to get our students prepared for the workforce to know that they have to know how to use these tools and leverage them to their benefit. So on one hand, there is a piece that is, being prepared as students, just like when I talk about immersive technology, this is part of their future on how they're going to be engaging and interacting in communities. They have to know how to engage in these spaces and these spatial learning experiences, really supporting them as learners. Seeing, like the chat box thing, I think has been really eye-opening because it's leveraging the limited amount of people that we would have to be able to have those conversations, but offering more of the collaborative spaces. I did something kind of crazy, and if you listen to the conversation from ISTE, I was sharing that I took, created myself a 3D avatar using Ready Player Me, and inserted my photo, converted it into a 3D animated person that I can use in all of my immersive spaces. So when I'm going into Mozilla Hubs, I can go in there. When I'm going into spatial, I can hop in and I still have my same avatar seamlessly across all of them, kind of my digital identity, if you will. But when I'm taking that, I took it to the next level and brought it in to a technology that allowed me to take my video content and allow my avatar then to mimic me as in my 3D form, right? So I wrote, I talked, I spoke in my video, and then my avatar mimicked exactly my movements in deepmotion.ai. And then I said, okay, now I got this really cool avatar, like talking for me, moving for me, looking similar to me. And then I brought that into augmented reality. So talk about app smashing. I then said, let's bring this into WebXR so people can scan my QR code and they literally see me pop up as an avatar and talk to them and show my motions as if it came from my video. So it's really wild, this transition, because I did a lot of app smashing, but I don't see us too far away from it all seamlessly happening in our spaces. We know that what they're going to be doing for facial detection in these immersive spaces using headsets is actually doing facial scanning, emotions. It's picking up, the gestures you're using, and it's animating that way in these spaces. So there's a lot of risk there, but there's also a lot of potential as well, as far as actually getting more of a realistic situation for us to engage online.
That's it. When you look at the new Apple headset, and the fact that it's going to sort of just scan your face the whole time, and it's not going to show your actual face outwardly, is it? It's going to put a representation of your face so people can see what you would be looking like, and then the whole FaceTime sort of avatars, and
emoji, right? It's going to be that emoji representing you in life like we've had on the Apple side. I think we could do so much better than that. Like, we've been doing emojis forever. Like, we have this technology, let's advance that to the next level, like bringing it 3-dimensional. So, and I think it's coming, but we're certainly at the starting point of that.
No, it's phenomenal. Thank you so much for those things you shared there, Jaime. Thank you. I'm going to bring things back to you now, Emma, if that's okay, because often forgotten because they don't teach quite as much as they might have used to, although I think there's always a place for school leadership to stay in the classroom. I think there's definitely an argument for that, but let's not do that today. So I don't want to argue with you about this, but I wondered, Emma, school leadership, are there ways that you and other colleagues in school leadership are using AI to support your work?
Well, I'm not doing anything like as exciting as Jaime was talking about. I really like the idea of like a 3D me being able to go to meetings and then I can be somewhere else, and actually it just brings all the information back afterwards. But unfortunately, I'll be honest and say we're not doing that yet. Now, one of the things we're trying to do at a leadership level at the moment, and I think this applies to like sort of trust central team leadership and also school leadership level, is really bring as many sort of stakeholders to the table as we possibly can in terms of what AI we're using and why and how. So one of the things that we've done is we've set up an AI steering group for the trust, and the idea with that is that that's going to have membership from our central team, from our sort of our support staff, teachers in the classroom. We're very fortunate we've got a governor for careers and AI at Denby who's going to be a part of that as well, and that we're using that to start to shape how we're going to be using AI going forward. Because again, going back to what I was saying earlier, it's very easy to demonstrate some things that are quite quick and flashy and quick wins. I mean, I'll be very honest. One of the ways that I got the CEO of our trust to appreciate the potential of AI and why we needed to be having the conversations when we were, is I showed a video demonstration of how it could write a development plan, you know, or my area of a development plan. So there are obviously those quick win ways that leaders can be producing things at that leadership level. But again, it comes back to this, but should you be doing that? Because actually where we produce the best development plans is when we sit down as a team and we all come up with the ideas and we talk and we throw ideas around and we have that human in the loop. So I think in terms of, you know, leadership level, what we're focusing on, and again, it's not the most exciting, flashy things, but we spent quite a lot of time talking about prompt craft. Because I had some staff that when they started to use LLMs were going, well, I put something in, I'm not happy with what I get out at the end of it. And it was because they were just putting a really basic instruction in and treating it like Google. Whereas what we have spent time on with our leaders is saying, this is what prompt craft is. This is how you can carefully construct something to get the output that you need. And again, where that's really nice, where you've got staff who perhaps aren't so techie or have been out the classroom for a while, is it's always coming back to language. And I don't know any teacher who doesn't get excited when you talk about writing and the importance of writing and the importance of language. So again, at a leadership level, that's really important with AI, is to almost like drill it back to the component parts, the elements that you need going into it to produce something sort of really, really good. And one of the things we will be doing through the AI steering group is producing our own list of like approved tools, things that have been used in the classroom that staff say, yeah, this was really good, this was effective, but also this was the impact of it. Because let's be honest, a lot of the time in ed tech, that's what we sometimes have missing, is that evidence of impact. I want to say, if only there was a bookmark that did that, you know, but you know, is that idea of having that approved list that's been properly tested in the classroom.
Brilliant. And you know what? I love the fact that you brought the conversation back to language and writing, because it is so important. And we talked before earlier on in the conversation today, didn't we, about the opportunity that this sort of technology brings, and anything that can actually help us to re-stress the importance of, you know, strong literacy skills. It can only be a good thing, right, Emma?
100%. And I think for a lot of teachers for whom, when you start talking about large language models and things like that, is actually, this is an alien language. When you bring it back to talking about literacy skills and quality of writing, that is a common touchstone that they can identify with. That's an inroad for a lot of staff.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Emma. Well, we're getting towards the end of the webinar today. I wanted to sort of wrap up, and if you've got any questions, please do put them into the chat here on the webinar. We'll try and bring them to our expert panelists for them to respond to if you've got any questions. But I wanted to pose the following question, because a lot of people ask this sort of question, and I've heard a variety of responses you know, in my lifetime. I want to ask you both, and I'll come to you first, Jaime. It's interesting, actually, that you were talking about, you know, making your own virtual avatar that could come up and dance and pretend to be you and all the rest of it. Do you think teachers will ever be replaced by AI?
Never. I just don't think you can lose the human touch to any of this. I think that if you don't have a human assessing and validating anything that we're getting, it's never going to be great. It might be decent, it might get us by, but I think real innovation comes from us. So I think that technology is pretty amazing, does some cool stuff, but I just don't think it has a human brain, certainly doesn't have the human touch to it. And when you lose the human, even if somebody, say you call a friend and say, I really need advice, and can you help guide me on this? And you were to talk to a chatbot, where's their investment? There's none. So you're not reaching out to a friend just to hear advice. You're reaching out to somebody that you trust. And I think when it comes to education, a lot of what we do with our students comes back to our heart for them, right? They know that our investment is there for those students. That's why we're there. We could be in any profession. When we're working with kids, it's because our heart is with them. And I think that the moment you start taking that away, their investment into education is going to fall flat.
A lovely answer. Thank you very much, Jaime. The same question to you, Emma.
I'll give a slightly more controversial answer, because I do agree 100%, Jamie, that I cannot see a situation where we do not need a human in the classroom. That's what children get so much more from school than just an education, don't they, when they go in? That's where we need people. I do think over time we're going to see, and again, it's a well-worn comment, that we are going to see teachers who know how to use technology replacing those who don't. I think teaching is a challenging, difficult profession, and I think those teachers that know how to use technology to reduce workload and support their own mental health, I think those are teachers that are going to stay in the profession. We know we've got a big recruitment crisis at the moment. I also think someone said something to me the other day that really made me think, because I always think about teachers in a traditional classroom, and they said, yeah, but not every child's in a classroom, Emma. We have some children that for various reasons are learning from home and can't go into school and can't access good teachers. So my one caveat to that is AI going to replace teachers? No. Can I see AI supporting the learning of children that for whatever reason, whether it's mental health or illness or anything, cannot access a traditional school environment? Yes, I can see it coming in and supporting that, where we've got children that need to learn maybe at different times or in a slightly different way. I can see it supplementing that and supporting it, but will it ever completely replace the human teachers in the actual classroom? No, I don't think so.
Brilliant responses, both of you. Thank you very much. And I guess it does bring in the question back around to ethics. Is it could it or should it even? And it brings it back to that old both the human touch and the human side of things that you both mentioned so eloquently in your answers. Listen, thank you both so much for your engagement and your responses to all the questions across the course of this webinar. I did ask if the audience had any questions, and unsurprisingly, we've got some questions asking to recommend some tools. So we've got one here. I'm not quite sure who it's from. Actually, it's from Amy Parks. Thanks for joining us, Amy. The question is twofold. I think you can both see it in the chat as well. Do you have a favorite? Here's some more. Do you have a favorite AI tool to use with primary age children, or a favorite to use for staff productivity? So if I ask, primary age children are sort of your youngest, sort of age 4 to 11, Jamie. Have you got a primary age sort of AI tool to recommend for younger children at all, Jamie?
That one's tough. And the reason being is giving it to the students. I'm cautious. There are some incredible things that are out there using AI, maybe not generative AI features in their products that aren't necessarily collecting information. I think that's going to be key. I use it in a totally different capacity, and a lot of it has to do with writing and graphics. But when it comes to those children, I think that there's opportunity for flagging and for teachers to have better visibility into interactions with students, more so than saying students to use it at that age. So I personally would say if a student has the opt-in to use something like that, that it would be done with parents at home that would support, as opposed to pushing that in a classroom situation. I think it's best supported through the teacher. So how can the teacher best support the students using AI, as opposed to the student being the end user, direct with the AI product? But that's my opinion about it.
No, I love your caution on that front as well, Jamie. Because well, I think it's a very, very sensible, pragmatic approach. I will jump to you, Emma, on the productivity front, and I'll come back to you another question in just a moment to preempt you, Jamie. I'm really keen to find out what that tool was that you mentioned that could turn case studies into social media shorts. So I might come back to you on that one as well. But Emma, productivity.
I was going to talk about primary school, actually. Is that okay?
Oh, yeah, of course you can.
Yeah, so I was thinking about that, because there's lots of tools, I think, for staff for productivity, and probably, like I say, if you asked how many staff were using ChatGPT at the moment or Google Bard, an awful lot of hands would go up. But for primary, I mean, it tends to vary which school I'm in and what we've been using. But one of the things I do like at the moment is a very simple little tool called Scribble Diffusion. which students don't need to log in, but they can go in and they can draw something, and then again using a literary prompt they can turn that drawing into almost like a photorealistic representation of what they've drawn. And I've used that, you know, with close supervision, obviously with children with sort of year 5 and 6. And what is so lovely about that is it's such an inclusive tool, because I'm not the world's greatest drawer, I'll tell you now. But I drew something that was meant to be a playground slide, and then gave it some description, and oh my gosh, you would have thought I was a genius with what it came up with. So I like AI that is inclusive. I like AI, you know, Mark mentioned earlier this idea about the democratization of creativity. I like AI that supports SEN learners, that supports EAL learners, that allows children to create something that would be very difficult otherwise. And if you're not great at drawing, that's a lovely little tool for generating something that actually is quite you end up with an end product that looks really nice. It doesn't always work, that's the one thing I would say. It's like a lot of these sites, it's a little bit, you know, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but when it works, it's very nice.
That's a great shout out there, Emma. Brilliant, thank you. It reminded me of a tool from Google as well, which is a bit like a matching pairs game, or sorry, not matching pairs, an odd one out game, where you're presented with like 4 images, and you have to sort of say which is the odd one out, which one of those images has actually been generated by AI. And it does provoke great conversations with children about AI and images that are generated, and again, things around bias and all those sorts of things. I'm mindful, Amy's responded and said, thank you very much. Thank you so much for that comment, Amy. We've got one last question just before we wrap things up from Tony Parkin. Should school districts or departments for education be exploring their own AI models to ensure privacy and ethical use whilst powering up education? Thanks for that, Tony. The godfather of EdTech himself there. If you don't know Tony Parkin, he is the godfather of EdTech here in the UK, certainly. Any thoughts on that, either of you, about whether schools and districts should be actually, or the Departments for Education here in the UK, should be actually exploring these things at a local level to keep it actually front and centre? You mentioned some of the bias and some of the fast and loose approaches from some companies earlier, Emma, without mentioning any names. Any thoughts on that, either of you?
I would say, Tony, in an ideal world, absolutely yes. I think it would be hugely powerful for schools, trusts, the DfE to sort of be creating these real safe spaces for our students to learn in. I think realistically, knowing that some schools are struggling to even pull together a digital strategy, let alone a fully powered AI model, we're not there yet. But again, what I think there is a lot of room for is this to be modelled, is for this to be developed with in those education environments where they are a little bit more ahead of the game, where they've perhaps got a bit more capacity, and to sort of develop something which can then be shared more widely. Because I think, yes, in an ideal world, it would be really lovely. Mark said earlier about the safe space, how we use filtering with the internet, and how we don't have anything like that for AI. So actually being able to develop and evolve that as a model, I think would be really, really powerful.
Another option is working in partnership with the companies that you trust, right? That you know have their privacy statements, as opposed to using something very public online. They're using a product that either was built from an organization or in partnership with an organization that can support the local. So they're coming, but as those things start coming, I think the importance is really having the trust and complete transparency with the companies you're working with on those projects.
Yeah, that's absolutely it, isn't it? It's transparency and openness, which you sometimes don't get from some companies. Listen, we're out of time. I want to make sure we do finish on the hour, so let's do our best to do that. Thank you so much, Jamie, for joining us on this webinar, this conversation. If you do want to follow Jamie on social media, then you can do so by literally typing her name with an @ symbol and no spaces between it, and you will find her everywhere that way. Emma's helpfully put hers into her title there, so please do look out for Emma Darcy, Darcy Pryor. Thank you for joining us for this conversation. Don't forget, we're back next week on the 28th of September with Beverly Clark and Alan McKenzie, looking at online safety. It was interesting what you were saying before, Emma, about that. around online safety and AI. Alan McKenzie recently shared a really interesting statistic about how AI is being used to create deep fakes of child. I can't even bring myself to say it. It's so so horrible. But please do join us next week, where both Alan and Mackenzie and Beverly Clark will be sharing the latest thinking around online safety, particularly linked into things around KICSI and safeguarding within your schools. And then the week after that, on the 5th of October, we've got another webinar lined up for you. On that one, we're going to be exploring data privacy, protection and usage with UK leading experts on the topic, Tony Shepherd and Claire Archibald. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. Thank you to NetSupport for supporting and hosting all of these. Learn more about us and the work we do at NetSupport Group on social media, or visit netsupportsoftware.com. But for now, thank you so much for joining us for this webinar. Thank you to Emma and to Jamie, and we'll see you on the next webinar. Thanks.